Coming up, a tribal elder is asking hard questions about the history of Colorado, and we learn about a new effort to bring the Hawaiian language to magazines. Plus, a soccer star hangs up his cleats. We visit with Chris Wondolowski. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT newscast.
Arizona PBS is proud to support Indian Country Today. For 6 decades, we've provided television programs and now digital content. But we go beyond that, sending outreach teams across Arizona, offering workshops in language and literacy, family engagement and community outreach, and supporting tribal communities with early learning and school readiness resources. Join us at azpbs.org.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Thank you for joining the ICT Newscast. We start in Canada. On Tuesday, the Williams Lake First Nation identified 93 possible burial sites located around the site of a church-run residential school. Chief Willie Sellers said the burial sites are only estimates and that excavation would confirm these human remains. At a news event, leaders from the nation opened Tuesday's meeting with a prayer for those affected.
I will say prayer for the children who cry and no one hears. For the children who wake up hungry and go to bed hungry. For the children who are missing and for those who are lost. For the children who suffer alone because they have no one who cares. For the children that no one loves, I will pray for these children.
The investigation near Williams Lake will continue so that the tribe can make final determinations. After serving more than 2 decades in the U.S. Supreme Court, Justice Stephen Breyer is retiring at the end of this court session. This move gives President Biden his first opportunity to appoint a new justice. After the news broke Wednesday, early reports indicated Biden will choose a Black woman to the post. That left many, including John Echohawk, who is the founder of the Native American Rights Fund, watching closely.
Well, of course, it would be great if we could have a Native American nominee, but looks like that's not going to happen. Well, I just hope that the record of the nominee that President Biden comes up with is a good record on federal Indian law, and we can have a justice there who knows about tribes and knows about federal Indian law.
Justice Breyer is 83 and has served since 1994. In Montana, historic paintings of tribal elders are being returned home after they were damaged in a fire on the Flathead Reservation. The 3 paintings are being returned to the Three Chiefs Culture Center. Officials at the center say getting the objects back is a, quote, pretty awesome feeling. Restoration work continues on other paintings, archives, and documents that were damaged in the fire. Officials say it was started by a local resident in September 2020 and that the individual also died in the blaze. On Tuesday, Vice President Kamala Harris said those who engage and commit acts of human trafficking must be held accountable. Data shows there is an estimated 25 million people around the world subject to human trafficking. And as of 2016, the National Crime Information Center has reported 5,700 cases of missing Native American and Alaska Native females. Harris says Indigenous people are some of the most vulnerable groups.
We are focused on the most vulnerable. And based on my experience, the most vulnerable are women and girls, racial and ethnic minorities, LGBTQI plus people, Indigenous people, people with disabilities, migrants, and children in the foster care system.
A new cabinet-level task force will include more than a dozen government entities responsible for combating human trafficking. Well, congratulations are in order for Indigenous artists around the country who have been awarded a major fellowship. On Thursday, the organization United States Artists announced its 2022 fellows. Indigenous artists make up 20% of the entire award class, which is a history-making number for the organization. Those artists are 13 in total and include textile artist Melissa Cody and musician Laura Ortman. Beadworker Karen Ann Hoffman has also been given the fellowship.
For 20% of the U.S. Artists Fellowship in 2022 to be Native really says that people are beginning to understand that our art is of the now, that we still exist, and that our art forms, although they are very old, stretch into the future, and so do our people.
The fellows will receive cash awards of $50,000. That money is unrestricted, which means they can use it to create new work, pay rent, get health care, or support their families. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, we meet Wando, the only Native professional soccer player to compete in the World Cup. Find out what his new job is now that he's retired. And the impact of Colorado treaties today, plus bringing the Hawaiian language to magazines. Stay with us. When Rick Williams was researching his family's Cheyenne roots, he discovered an 1860s proclamation that called for Coloradans to kill hostile Indians and take their property. It stayed on the books until last summer. He started the People of the Sacred Land to look at other atrocities against Colorado's indigenous people. Welcome, Rick. Tell us about your work.
Oh, Midako Yapi. I think it's relatively simple. When you ask the question, why are there no Indian reservations on the Front Range of Colorado or in the Eastern Plains? And there are only two small reservations in the other part of Colorado when this was once the homeland of thousands of Indians.
And in your research, what are some of the most surprising things that you found so far?
Well, I think, I started looking at one of the treaties, and one of the most shocking things I saw was the interpreter for the Arapahoes in this treaty couldn't speak the language.
I mean, I think all around the country, a lot of historians find similar things. I actually want to circle back to this introduction, which of course was that there was a law saying that people of Colorado could kill Native people. And tell us about your work to sort of address that and sort of what's come from the work in that discovery.
So that was part of a series of things that happened with the 1861 Fort Wise Treaty, which basically was designed to take Indian land and convert it into settler land. And because they were having problems doing it, they had to figure out ways to get rid of the Indians. And one of them was to declare war on them. That was the first proclamation. The second one was to kill Indians, individuals in the state. And of course, this led to the final thing, the Sand Creek Massacre. And basically after that, there were no Indians left in that part of the country.
And I understand that part of your work actually got this law overturned recently.
I went to the governor and convinced him to rescind both of those proclamations in August. And I think that was an important step for us. It's led to the work that we're doing now.
I'm really curious, what was the reaction of Colorado people who aren't Native when they learned about this? Was this something that enraged them, or really what was their reaction in learning about this?
I think most people were shocked because they never knew anything about Colorado history, and I think it did cause. I guess the most people were concerned about Indians. We were worried because we thought somebody might try to kill us and take our property.
I'd love to hear about new initiatives that you're working on now.
So our next step was to design a Truth and Restoration and Education Commission, similar to a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, except for we have to have conciliation before you can get reconciliation. And so the group of us, the People of the Sacred Land, worked together and we independently raised money to create our own commission that's independent. And we are working on towards identifying the truth and looking at a number of aspects. One of the very important ones is we want to know about the economic loss of our people in this state. And so we've commissioned a study to look at that data.
I guess what are some of the tangible ways to look at that economic loss?
Well, one of the things you look at first is like our primary economy was the buffalo, and the buffalo was deliberately destroyed. And consequently, we didn't have, resources that other people would have had going forward. We're also looking at the loss of land, illegal occupancy, oil and gas, water, all of the things that would have been part of our life are going to be evaluated for economic loss.
And what do you think are the impacts of having people like the governor of Colorado listen to your findings? Is that something that you'll continue to do, is bring this to elected officials to try to make change?
Yes, we will. And we anticipate that at some point, and that's why I think the economic data is important. It's difficult to make a case if you can't demonstrate a significant economic loss, and we'll do that. Hopefully, at some point, there will be a bill before the Colorado State Legislature addressing those issues.
And on a national scale, is this something that you know of is happening in other states, or how are you sort of working with other Indigenous advocates to address the atrocities that happened in their own states and their own homelands?
Well, I think we're going to start working across other nations. Right now, we're focusing on Colorado. This will be the test for what's going to happen in other places, and we hope to replicate what's going on and support others to do the same thing.
This might seem like a really silly question, but Rick, why is it important to you on a personal level to be doing this work?
Because my great-great-grandfather was one of the dog soldiers here in Colorado, and this is our homeland, and we don't have a place in our homeland.
Well, Rick, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. A lifestyle magazine called Flux Hawaii has a new editor, and Ha'alilio Solomon is a Hawaiian language instructor at the University of Hawaii, and he has been hired to bring the Hawaiian language to the magazine. He has been a resource to local newsrooms for years, translating the English language into his own. And he joins us now to tell us about his new job. Welcome to our newscast, Ha'a.
Aloha, mahalo for having me. Happy to be here.
So tell us about your new position at Flux Hawaii.
So it's the editor of the new Hawaiian language column in the Flux Hawaii magazine, which is part of the Nella Media Group. And it's the first editor position that's fully in Hawaiian language. We've had several studios and news stations sort of translate previously written articles that were in English. And this is the first time in decades. We're actually from the beginning stages of brainstorming the articles all the way to publications in Hawaiian. So I'm speaking with other writers in Hawaiian. We're doing the editing process in Hawaiian, the whole thing. So that's exciting.
One of the main parts that I love about journalism is really to look back and see all of the examples that Indigenous people have created before me. And one of those, of course, is the fact that Hawaiians have had newspapers in their traditional language for many, many years before that. And it seems that you're carrying on that legacy.
Yeah, that legacy of literacy. That's why earlier I said we can't say that I'm the first editor to be in this sort of position for a Hawaiian language column. Hundreds have filled this position before, and stepping into it is a big honor for me.
You know, one of the other things that really stands out to me is the fact that the Hawaiian language was actually banished for a time. Can you reflect on that?
So the Act 57 of 1896 and 1897 said English is the formal language of instruction for both public schools and private schools in Hawaii. And that was a significant setback that disenfranchised and really harmed the Hawaiian language in across its entire spectrum of use, particularly in the education system. But also, it led to a pretty severe stigma against Hawaiian language being used in other domains, social domains, political domains, economic domains, etc. So for a long time, our Hawaiian language really sort of retreated to this space of media and newspapers. And we are today very fortunate to have such a wide and vast written corpus of Hawaiian language newspapers and primary sources. But the Hawaiian language ban certainly was, in schools, certainly incapacitated our language.
And now that readers of Flux Hawaii will have the opportunity to open up this magazine and see their language printed, what does that mean to you?
It's a huge step forward, and it's a lot of progress in terms of representation. We have so many kids coming up through the immersion system, and to be able to see our language represented in a very beautiful, contemporary, journalistic space and venue is so important. And Flux Hawaii does such a beautiful job of with their photography and their formatting and their graphic design, and to see all of this this creativity in journalism also happening in Hawaiian language is exciting, and I think it's a great step in the right direction.
And maybe one of these days, one of the Hawaiian language students will grow up to be the editor and know that that is a job for them, and that's something that's an asset in their community.
Absolutely. That, just 10 years ago, and even still today, there is some skepticism about the value of a Hawaiian language degree at the university. And I think this is proving that there is not just economic value, but a lot of other social and cultural value and historical value and linguistic value that a Hawaiian language degree or just when someone dedicates themselves to the revitalization cause.
I'm very curious as we move forward and as you move forward in this new position, what are some of the challenges that you expect to run into, and how do you think that you'll be able to work through those?
So, we're still revitalizing our language, and the way English has kept up with pop culture and mainstream culture Hawaiian hasn't necessarily kept up in the same ways. So we are still working through all of those little and at the same time very significant struggles. So there's nothing easy about revitalizing a language, and the only way to succeed is through it, and there's no way around these sorts of issues and struggles. But it's all worth it, and something like this really helps to normalize our language, which is sort of the current phase of the revitalization movement, is to normalize our language in our linguistic landscape here in Hawaii.
Well, Ha'a, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll be right back. After 17 years playing professional soccer, Chris Wondolowski retired last November and traded his playing position into an office job. He has had a few months to transition into this new role, and he joins us to share more about his remarkable career. Welcome to the ICT newscast, Chris.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've had a few months now to reflect on your very remarkable career. What stands out to you most?
Well, right now, I think the thing that stands out most is the friendships and the camaraderie in the locker room. I think that's the part I miss the most right now. I know I'm freshly removed, but I loved being out there on the field. I loved, scoring goals and winning, but it was the friendships and hanging out and the banter in the locker room. I think that I miss the most right now.
I always love to ask, especially because you started and you spent so much time playing soccer. How did you actually get introduced to playing soccer?
Oh, that's a great question. I grew up playing all sports and every sport possible, baseball, basketball, track, soccer. My dad played soccer. He played collegiately at UC Berkeley. And so I think that love for the game started young. And I always had that extra, I think, passion for it. I loved every sport, whatever season I was in. That was my favorite sport at the time. But when soccer came around, it seemed to just have a little bit extra passion for it.
And you did very well in your professional career, of course. When you look back, what is the accomplishment that you're most proud of?
I have a couple. One representing the country in the World Cup down in Brazil, I think is was amazing and something that will always stick with me. But winning the championships, winning the trophies, I was able to win two MLS Cup championships, then also two Supporter Shields, which are the best record during the regular season for the season. And so very honored for both of those, and yeah, I love those.
What do you attribute your success to?
I definitely believe that my mentality and my drive and my competitiveness, I think, is what really kept me around. It took me a while to get on the scene. I was a late bloomer, and so I was never tracked, during ODP or state team or youth national teams. And so I was went through puberty late, matured late, and I was only recruited by a Division II school in Chico State out of high school, and so I went there. And, I think that I always just kind of had that chip on my shoulder and always wanted more. And so I think it always took me a while to break in, but I think that's what I credit to for the longevity.
If a young Native child is watching this interview and says, I'm a late bloomer, I want to start something new, what advice do you have for those kids?
My advice, and a little bit cliche, but there are many paths to your final goal. And, some are the straight, short, direct route, and some are the long, windy roundabout. But usually those are the most scenic, the most beautiful, and the ones that you remember the most. And so that was kind of my journey. And that's the thing that you always have to remember is there'll be obstacles in the way of your path and of your road, but it's how you overcome them, how you get past them, and how you continue on that path.
I want to circle back to what you said earlier, which is that one of the things you're most proud of is playing in the World Cup. For someone who's never been there before, describe what that feeling is like.
Oh, it's amazing. To be honest, I get goosebumps, just thinking about it, to represent your country and to be, one of the 23 players that, your country is representing in the World Cup, and to be in the final there, to be in the World Cup finals there. It's amazing down in Brazil. And so it was just an absolute, you could feel the energy and feel the buzz around the city. It was around the country, and it was anytime any game was going on, it was a complete standstill. And I loved playing our games, but it was down in Brazil, and when Brazil was playing, you could hear cannons going off when they scored. It was complete mayhem, and those are some of the memories that really stick with me. And it was a true honor.
Talk about goosebumps. I feel like I'm getting goosebumps just listening to you recap and think about all of these really great memories. I'd love to ask you about what you're up to now. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Still working with the San Jose Earthquakes in the front office. And right now, I really want to fall down the path of the player development. And so, especially in the youth in our academy. And so the 12 to 18-year-old range is something that I really find a lot of interest in, and trying to identify the talent. And then once we identify them, be able to help to mentor them, help them both on and off the field through those tough years. And I think that, it's always tough, especially as a, 16, 17, 18-year-old. You've always been top of your class, been able to produce, and a top athlete, and now you're thrown into grown men and professionals, and sometimes it takes a little bit of finding your feet. And that's a position where I'm hoping to really help mentor those guys and bring them along and show them how to be a professional both on and off the field.
Speaking of the San Jose earthquakes, one of the major programs that they have, of course, is celebrating Native American Heritage Month, and they actually dedicate a specific game to Native American Heritage Night. As you are playing, what were some of the highlights there for you? And as you're retired, will you continue to be at those games and show your face in that capacity?
Absolutely. I'll still be involved in every capacity I can. I'm an enrolled member of the Kiowa Nation and Kiowa Nation. And I love it. I love being a part of, that's who I am. And so I will do anything in my power to help, move our nation and into a better way, and any way I can. And I love it.
Well, Chris, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. For all the latest news and updates, visit IndianCountryToday.com. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.